Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andre. I'm your bookworm, dragon, worm, whatever you want to call me. And today we don't have a book review because we've reached the end of the month of October. We've started November, so let's do a wrap up of October and the predictions of what I shall be reading in November. Before we jump into it, don't forget, subscribe, like the content, and comment away what are the books you're expecting to read in November. Have you reached your goals for the year? The year is almost over and it's crazy how time is flying past. I'm lucky because I'm ahead of my reading goals, so I want to know about you. So for the ones that don't know what these videos are about, basically at the end of each month, I just talk about very briefly about the books I finished in the previous month, and then I basically chat a bit about the books I'm planning to read. This doesn't mean that I will read them, because sometimes there's just some spontaneity to it that I read some other books that weren't planned, but it's a prediction of what I want to read at least. This month, or best, the month of October, it started off really well. I was reading really fast, reading lots of books, and suddenly the halfway mark started and my reading got into kind of a slump. So in the end, I was only able to finish 4 books and 4 manga volumes. But I mean, it might not sound that bad. I mean, 4 books and 4 manga volumes, that's 1 of each per week, more or less. But the fact is, 3 of those books and 3 of those volumes I finished within the first 2 weeks of October. The other ones I took this long to finish. But at least the books I finished were a bit big, so overall I read 2,700 pages, which is pretty good overall, better than the previous month where I read 2,300 pages, so there's that silver lining to it. And the other good thing was that overall the scores were better than last month as well, because the range of scores I gave went from 3 to 4.8, so that's really good, all positive. Now let's see which books received which. But first, before jumping on to the books I finished, let's just say the books I am currently reading. So at the moment, I am reading A Memory of Light by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson, and as many of you know, this is the last book of the Wheel of Time series. I am currently in the last battle. I'm almost finishing the last battle, so I'm very close to the end of this book. I'll definitely finish in November, and all the feels this book brings is just, it's so good. I cannot describe how good it is. I mean, my heart has been squeezed and every drop of blood and tears and sweat has been squeezed out of it, and I feel drained after reading this, but also super fulfilled for reading it. I feel like rereading this series has brought a new love to the series that I didn't know I had, because I already loved this series, but rereading it really made me rediscover the reason why I loved it so much. But so I will definitely finish this book in November. There will be for sure a review of it, so just wait around and you shall see it eventually. My other read is The Lord of the Mysteries by Cuttlefish That Loves Diving. And I know the name of the author sounds weird, but this is a web novel written by a Chinese author that was recommended by a friend of mine. I've been reading it, been enjoying it, although of course I do have to take into account that this is not like any of the novels I read. It's quite different, the format. It wasn't written in the same way or with the same purpose as a normal novel. So there's a lot of things to take into account. So far, I'm about 40% in, so almost halfway. I have several thoughts about it, but I want to finish it before divulging more. There will be a book review about it, but I need to finish it first, and it's a big one, so I don't know if I'll be able to finish before November ends. So far, my overall opinion is positive. It's been good. My third read, and it was kind of a surprise, in the moment kind of decision that I'm currently reading, is The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This is a spooky read. It's a horror book, so it fits well with the spooky season. I'm recording this video a couple of days before Halloween, and I will finish it probably on Halloween, so it lands just right. And so by the time this video actually comes out, I probably have finished it. But I'm enjoying it. It's a different read from fantasy and sci-fi. Horror is a bit different. I enjoyed reading it from time to time. And my overall opinion is, yeah, it's scary at times. It has some good twists. Not amazing plot twists, but they were pretty good. I could see them coming, but I was still delighted that they happened. So that's the overall opinion. I will put a review about it later on, but just so you know. Okay, now with the ongoing reads out of the way, let's focus on the books that I actually finished in October, starting with, of course, our Wheel of Time series, because I finished The Towers of Midnight by Brandon Sanderson and Robert Jordan. They co-authored this one. I mean, Robert Jordan died before he was able to finish. Brandon Sanderson jumped in and finished this. So there's that. This is the 13th book of the series, second last one, and I think, in my opinion, this book withstands the quality that the previous one left on. So I don't know if you know, book 12 was amazing in terms of writing, plot, everything, and this one was able to withstand that quality. I don't think it was just as good. It missed a couple of marks, but it was still really, really good. An amazing read, especially because we finally see some of the threads that have been hanging loose starting to tie up and leading up to the final battle, or the last battle. The review for this book isn't out yet, but it will be soon, and I cannot wait to talk more about it because, yeah, there's so many details that need to be mentioned, and I want to hear your opinion if you think the same way as me or not. Because I think the second half of the series, after the slog, is just amazing book after amazing book. It's a quality that is tremendous. And I think the general public agrees, because on Goodreads, this book has a score of 4.47 out of 5, which is really high. And my score was 4.6 out of 5. So as you can see, it's not as good as the 12th, but it's still a really good score, especially for a 13th book of a series. That's crazy. But yeah, more details to come soon. The next book I finished was The Velvet Rage by Ellen Downs. This I read on my Kindle. It's a non-fiction book recommended by a few friends as well, and it was an interesting read. However, I did have a couple of things that weren't exactly to my liking. I think it did not age well. I mean, the book was released in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. But the thing is, I think regarding this particular subject, a lot of things have changed in the last 20 years. So it might have felt a bit aged in some aspects, not all. So some things still apply, but definitely not all of them. And the other grip I had was that I think it was a bit too narrow in focus or in scope, because it only focused on a subsection of the population, Western white men. Whereas there's a whole variety of other people that will go through similar things, but in completely different contexts, and that matters a lot for the development. And so this was actually the book I gave the lowest score this month. On Goodreads, this book has a good score. It scores 4.06 out of 5, but for me, this was the 3 out of 5. Of course, I don't consider my usual categories for this book because it's a nonfiction. There's no plot or characters or world building. So this is just my overall opinion about this book. And the other thing is, I probably won't be reviewing this book on the channel because I think the score that you give and your opinion on it is super subjective to the experiences you had growing up, and therefore it might depend a lot on your experiences, and you might think that it's an amazing book and you learned a lot from it, or you might think that you don't identify with it at all. So there's that difference, and for that, just know that I give a 3 out of 5, but there won't be really a review about it. But I mean, I'm still happy to chat with people about it, just not in the review type of way. And after finishing The Velvet Rage, I finished Blood of the Mantis by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the broken binding edition, that's why it doesn't have the dust jacket, but yeah, I can see. It was an okay book. It wasn't exactly what I expected. It suffered a bit of middle book syndrome. I mean, this is the third book of a 10-book series, so I expected that at some point it had to slow down, just like The Slog and The Wheel of Time, but didn't expect it to be this early. I hope that the next books aren't as bad. Not that this one was bad, it just felt that I ended the story exactly how I started, so it felt like the whole plot of this book was a bit meaningless for the great sense of things, if I can say that. But I mean, it wasn't super bad. There are some positive aspects to it, and I will be talking about it in the review that I post. But I think the overall opinion about this book is quite similar across, there's a consensus across people, because on Goodreads, the score kind of went down from the previous books to a 3.97 out of 5. And my score was a 3.2 out of 5. So as you can see, not much better than the previous book I spoke about. Of course, they're completely different, so there's no point comparing, but yeah, this one 3.2. Before it was much higher, so let's hope that the fourth book increases again. Otherwise, evil side. And the last one that I read was also one of the best books I read this year, and that is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is the first book of a planned trilogy. I mean, initially there was going to be 3, but Octavia E. Butler died, and so she was only able to write 2 of these books. But nonetheless, this first one was amazing. It's also very sad and depressing, so be warned about that. And I find it crazy how Octavia Butler wrote this book almost 30 or more than 30 years ago, and how accurate some of these things are. It's creepy, it's eerie. It seemed like she had a window to the future somehow and wrote a story that was just slightly different. But at the way we're going, this story might actually turn true. So it might affect you quite a bit if you're sensitive to everything that has been happening in our planet. But it's also an extremely interesting read and really, really valuable to read it. I mean, there will definitely be a review about this book on my channel, so keep an eye out for it. But as scores go, on Goodreads, this book has a score of 4.21 out of 5, which as of itself is really good because it's a sci-fi book. Usually those tend to have lower scores, but also 4.21 is quite high. And my score was 4.8 out of 5, so practically a 5. I mean, Goodreads, it's a 5 for me. So you can see there's only a couple of things that I would have changed, but overall, amazing book. And at the same time, I cannot wait to read the second book, but I also need to give some time and space for me because that was heavy, and reading that book was, a lot. So I'm gonna pause before reading the second one. As for mangas, I read One Piece, and I read 4 volumes of it, which was volumes 45 to 48. So these 4, and this is pretty much the start of the Thriller Bark arc, which is funny and referential to a lot of horror tropes, which kind of match the vibe of this month with Halloween coming up. Or in this case has passed already because this video will come out after Halloween. And overall, I think the volumes were quite good, especially the last ones. I think were better than the last 2 were better than the first 2, even though Goodreads completely disagrees with me because the scores on Goodreads were 4.6, 4.39, 4.36, and 4.36. Jesus, this is hard to say. Whereas my scores were 4, 4.4, and 4.8. So as you can see, as I read, the scores kept going higher, whereas on Goodreads they kind of kept going lower, which, I mean, is just opinions, right? So there's that. I cannot wait to keep reading it, especially because this is a short arc, so hopefully I'll be finishing it soon and going into even bigger and more epic things. And so those were all the books/mangas that I finished in October. Now moving on to what am I gonna read in November? And we start with kind of a question mark, because once I finish A Memory of Light, I will be done with my buddy read, and I don't really know what we're gonna read next. I mean, we're still gonna read the short story Soul of Rivers by Brandon Sanderson and Robert Jordan, which is in the Wheel of Time world, but that will be short, and I'm sure we'll be done that in November, but I don't really know what we're gonna read after, so that is still up in the air. But that also means that I will have more time to read other books in the meantime, so that will kind of go, that time will go into the time for the other books. Once I finish The Lord of the Mysteries, which I'm not really sure I'm gonna finish in November, but if I do, I might jump again into Ryan Cahill's world, the Bound and the Broken series, and maybe I'll read a short story called The Exile, which is a short story that happens between the second and the third book of his series. And if I finish that, maybe I'll read the third book, or maybe I'll jump into something different. I'm still not quite sure. This month is very unsure about what will be my next reads on those 2 fronts. But on the other hand, I know exactly what I'm gonna read once I finish The Last House on Needless Street, and that will be Sorcery by Terry Pratchett. Because I've been promising this for ages. I haven't read any Discworld in months, and I really need to go back to that world, especially because I have still a lot to go through. So Sorcery will be my next read, and I'm very keen for it, especially to relax and read something funny and fun. And after Sorcery, I will be continuing the Powder Mage trilogy written by Brian McClellan and read the final book of that trilogy, which is The Autumn Republic, like I said, by Brian McClellan. I've read the first two quite a while ago now, so I think it's time to finish this series and see if it ends in a boom or if it kind of crashes. Hopefully it doesn't. And because I need to push myself and I need to have at least 3 books to read in November, the one I predict that I will be reading is Aurora by Kim Stanley Robinson. This is a science fiction book. I've read Kim Stanley Robinson before with his Mars trilogy, which is a trilogy composed of the books Red Mars, Blue Mars, Green Mars, I think that's the order. They're really good. They're actually these 3 books here. They were quite a good read, hard sci-fi, so heavy to read, but also there were a lot of things that I thought were really cool concepts. So I'm keen to read this one. I've heard good things, but that was like many years ago, so who knows if they stand the test of time, but we shall see. Oh, and this is a standalone book, so there's no continuations. It'll be a good one-off book to read and then move on to another thing. And those are all the books. Of course, I'll still be reading mangas. Hopefully I'll be reading a lot of volumes, but don't quote me on that, because we all know that when I say that I'm going to read a lot, I never end up reading a lot. But hey, 4 volumes will be a great goal, so let's try that and we shall see. But I think that concludes the predictive and wrap-up reading for October-November. So now I'm passing the ball to you. I want you to let me know if you finished a really good book in October that you recommend, or what you're really excited to read in November. Comment down below, and don't forget, if you're new, subscribe, like the content, and I'll be seeing you soon, okay? On Sundays and Thursdays, okay? Bye!